She worked with Red Earth for many years on our Year 2 collaborative module, where we look at young audiences, and they'll be doing both speculative project on a school's touring mode, and then they'll develop their work in conjunction with young people at Mellors School, normally work with, which we've been working with about over 25 years now, and work with those young people from Mellors and develop a show which they'll then come and see, and then we'll do workshops with those young people as well. So also been working with yourselves, Red Earth, on puppet direction of, I suppose, any sort of advice about whether you should or shouldn't use puppets, or whether puppets have evolved through shadow or 3D. I think all the things we've done now over the years, like different aspects of
some object theatre.
Object theatre stuff, yeah, so anything that needs animating really on stage in one way or another, which is really fascinating, and it has always been fascinating. Yeah. Because I sort of come into it as much as it's been part of the course since I was a student, I suppose. And so this idea of working with young people is key, and I think that came out of a whole history of working with theatre and education at a certain era and a certain point, and it was the course was run by very political people, and it was a deliberate part of the course really to work with young audiences. I think that's always been part of it, and so that devising aspect I think has always been part of it also. I think the course has always been quite performative in the past, where we would be working with directors, because it was a director running the course as well. So I think devising, as the show that I remember, and I can't remember who it was now that I went in, so we did the Minotaur, the whole story of the Minotaur, and we developed it as a game, and we went into schools, and sort of kids had to pick up bits of information, and I suppose back in the 80s that was quite, for us it's really exciting about how to give stories back to young people in different ways and different formats. So yeah, I think it's been key. And although I think the value of it has always been, people don't always understand the idea of working with young people is very important. I think just flying that flag, working it, and it applies to. It doesn't matter if it is for young people, because even if you go and work with older audiences or mixed audiences, then the fundamentals of that is key for all of that really. And keeping theatre an element, because we've just done a project recently, keeping the element of understanding imagination and understanding audience projection, and that's really key. Adaptation is like another level. You've got devised, and you maybe have a script, a traditional script. In fact, it can be more complicated. I think it relieves the students, because the students have more of an open agenda about how they do it. It gets a bit more tricky about, okay, so who's the actor, who's the puppet, and what's going on. But I think it gets them far more, in the visual sense, but then that interpretation, I think the students respond a lot better sometimes from a visual narrative than it does from a text. But also the poem, it's about the spaces in between and the openness of those aspects of that text. Because if it is a script, I think it can still be open, but I think it's sometimes a bit more less exciting to work on sometimes. Loads, as we both know, Amanda. It's chicken and egg, isn't it? And I think that's always been the problem. With sort of, in a way, it's not a problem because it's just a learning point. I think the more we went on with the projects, the more we realised you want that idea of having a full play. It doesn't matter what happens at the end, but you still got to show at the end. I mean, there was a bit of, oh God, well that's. But I think it became more playful, isn't it? So, but it's also quite a constrained amount of time. You've got a lot of information to get across, and I think students, as much as we are, I think we want a lot, as opposed to sort of learning less, and then it's just quite often at the end sort of finding out what you can cut through. But I think because we work in the Devised, because it's quite often it's immersive, but quite often it's scale that we can do now. It's light, it's sound, it's a lot. It's total theatre. But we're sort of giving that experience to the student, I suppose. and design to a performance, which quite a lot of them are. And then you're embedding a whole aspect of that your specialism, Red Earth, which is really key, I think really exciting, the whole aspect of captioning and working for an audience that don't necessarily have the same way of sort of taking in just another layer really, but I think that's been the most exciting, although I don't think we've had enough time to play with it, which is a shame. With the schools, yeah, I think both of us are very busy. I think both, even more so schools, I think the university and schools, so try and find a moment, key moments where you can have interaction is quite difficult because everybody's got very difficult agendas and time scales, but because the question about the impact of that, I suppose, I think sometimes you don't always know. You know then at the time when you're working with them and the workshops that you might be doing or the interaction you might have, you can see it there. I think there's always a great buzz from the teacher and things like that, and I think they do take on further into their curriculums aspects that we've been working with. But I think fundamentally it's in the moment that quite often those are happening. And I think because the other day when we went in, and now this is now sort of a school for a regional school for sort of deaf children being sort of taught there. So they've got about 15 young deaf students, I think, working at different levels of the school, different year groups of the school. But I think because you've got the whole year class and because you're sort of sharing it like we've gone in, I think, and it's, they can draw, they can look at things which are about narratives which are visual narratives, and I think there's a lot of possibilities for young people who aren't necessarily great achievers to achieve great responses. I mean, that's, to me, it's the same with art. I think you sort of empower people at different levels to be able to do things. And we did Tin Soldier recently, so we went in, and it was really interesting because fundamentally we go in and we play with materials, and that whole idea of making the dancer and the tin soldier, talking about materiality and things about, so we can make a puppet out of paper and make a tin soldier. But one of the young learners at Mellors, I remember, because you asked them the question, what's it about? And that's a really dangerous thing to ask, but I think we've done that before. Yeah. What is it about? You put it out there, and they're not afraid to answer, but there was a bit of a, nobody really answered, and one young boy sort of said, it's about people who want to be together but can't be together. And I suppose it was just hitting the nail on the head. It was just sort of, so I think, and that boy putting that in front of the class and the teachers might have raised his profile. I suppose so there's elements like that you can see. Or this time it was the story of the young, she's from Sudan, I think. She speaks Arabic, she doesn't sign, and she's deaf, but she's got her implants, so she's quite good at hearing, so she doesn't speak English. So she's doing it all, basically, learning how to sign and how to learn English. But she did the most amazing drawings in response. So I think, yeah, we know that it helps a lot, the young learners who maybe have difficulty at school, but this is when they can excel as well. So I think, yeah, the impact is very much there. I don't really notice the impact so much after, because we're also busy. Everybody just goes back to their job. But ideally, yeah, it'd be great to embed it more into the school. It's basically, I think what you've brought in as a Red Earth, it was a lab model, and I think it's obviously Amanda's wanting to play with that yourselves and opening it up for a real research aspect. I think for us that was quite different because we were always full on, look, go and do it in a sort of theatre sense. It's like got the technical rehearsal, so the discipline's still there, the diligence of tech rehearsals and dress rehearsal and all that. But I suppose that real exploration was a bit more laboratory. You've got people who've done that for a long period of time, so you can feel a little bit confident to play around a little bit more because somebody's going to sort it out at the end. But I think, yeah, and it is real exploration that you want to try stuff out and try to find different ways of telling a story through, because Amanda's interest in the visual and my interest in also the sort of the object and things, so it was a real want to push the boundaries, and I suppose, of elements of working with everybody. about interpretation. I think it was open. I think that openness to be able to have that relaxed sort of attitude, as well as a diligent one, because I always remember the whole thing is the students having that thing to come on, you've got to buck up, this is a presentation. To realise the students that they have, this is something really important. Although we're all playing and having a good time, there is a level of it which we've all got this great opportunity, I suppose, and privilege to be working to creating these stories for people. So I think, there's a real healthy sort of atmosphere with all of that, and I think that's a legacy partly to sort of make it more lab-based. And it depends how much you let go. I mean, in a way, how much can you sort of let that happen without indoctrinating it too much from a sort of knowledge point of view, that it might develop into other things new that might not hit the norm of what we call theatrical narrative. Because I'm always open to that, as well as I think yourself, to open it up. What could it be? Which, I mean, there's a thing where it has to happen and you have to present it. So there is a way of doing it. Well, I think the kids would, they'd be happy with it. So I think that's sort of legacy, trying to build that and trying how far can you push that really. So who is requiring it? Who, if you could talk to a client and young people, what do they want? I mean, like I think we went in. Where did we go in? Is that where we went in last time?
Yes.
Yeah. What do you want? It's like, we want to be scared. And that was the whole thing about upping a notch for our students about the level of what they could play at. Because they wouldn't necessarily know. So, having that first-hand contact is really key. And then having our opportunity of like, okay, now let's see what we can do with all that. So that's really powering up. Having the director is really key, because you can put everything in and then you've got to thin it out. So that's good to have somebody being able to sort of visualise that in a way of making it sure it happens. Because we can both be amazed by stuff. I think both that Soon Child was one of the most evocative in a way of sort of things happening. And I think, because I was trying to think about it, because you've not only got the thing, but then you've got design for performance, you've got light, you've got transitioning. Now transitioning students are kind of a hard thing to teach in a sense of design. And so I think that's really interesting about that, about how that swaps. But like that simple technique that we're both like absolutely mesmerised about, which is just like a bit of tin foil, a light, a person and a tiny puppet. And it's just like, we're just watching Gemma go up and down. And you could have watched it for hours, I suppose. But then, it's you just helping with, you've just got different eyes, I suppose, about what looks and what gears to keep it up. So I think that directorial role is quite key in a way, and to keep it as a part of the legacy aspect, which is difficult when you've got constraints of budgets and stuff. But I think that is quite key, and it's very much a collaborative, artisanal way of working within a company-based thing. I think because there's different directors. I think you can get a director and just say, right, do that. I think obviously the Red Earth approach is far more sort of collaborative and democratic in the sense of how it works together. So that's really key about how that works. But the languages are, I'm still questioning always about the aspect of theatre and how it's been set up in a way. So languages and multi-languages, as we know, but then there's the unsubliminal language and all that goes on, and it gets very complicated. And I think, different things can do different things. Puppets can do different things, objects, actors, sound, music, musicians. And it's all about focus again. So again, the director's role in that's really important, about all those things at once, but what do you want to look at or feel? But I think we've had a go at stuff. It's funny because I've just come back from that show recently, but non-linear narratives I'm getting really excited about, in a way, because I think we're all so used to sort of a certain aspect of narrative. But I think it's interesting. You've got to have, for young people, it's important. I think sometimes I have a sort of a key to do things, but we all know they can fill the spaces in between really easily. So it's sort of, trying to find out different ways of honing those, all those things which tell stories and have different disciplines to do it. But I suppose signing and puppets is difficult. We've tried that, I think. And then the stories we've had, really, that's more to do about Red Earth, about that's it, I suppose. The aspect of je ne sais quoi, the bit of je ne sais quoi, the bit in between where you're trying to be not descriptive but suggestive, which I think I've found really hard in sort of the deaf theatre role, because it can't be that whole BSL thing where it's got to be like fixed. And the idea of suggesting something but it's not clear is counterproductive to something, but at the same time you're not allowing a certain community of people to be able to see something in a sort of more suggestive state. So I think, it's very difficult. I think on the whole accessibility issue is more difficult with like deaf audiences, but I think we never really powered it as much as we could have done here with the sort of access, but I think we should put in captioning, tried it out, let students know that might be something that people don't have that level, so they've got to build it in some way for that person to understand, although we've always had the signer, I think, in the room. Not really. I think because it was always. I mean, I've been known it for a long time, but deaf people normally listen a lot better than anybody else. So they're good. They make good puppeteers, and they have a way of looking at rhythm and aspects of movement a lot differently. It's far more advanced than a lot of other people. So they don't take in those considerations. So they're always much better. Although it can be frustrating for them, I think, sometimes in that rehearsal setup when you're putting a lot on. But I think other constraints that they would have had, no, not really. I think that thing I always wanted to do, but about when it's just really limited down, there's nothing there apart from the person. Without, I think you just caught me on the day with it, but theatricality sometimes gets in the way because there's so much going on. But if you just had that whole thing about visual vernacular, which I think was closer to me about the poetics of movement and suggestion a little bit more. There was gaps in between the clarity of like signing, I suppose, which was a bit more. And that is, but yeah, image and signing, I think are fascinating in a sense of its clarity of movement dynamics. It's just like I think they're both very similar, aren't they? So that story you told me about how a deaf signer, if it's a young child, the idea of slurring your words, like as older you go, you're very much cleaner in the way you end a sign and start a sign. But if somebody's doing it young, they sort of, I think it was you, Randy, you told me the story about they're slightly mixed up. They haven't got the stops and the starts right.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's sort of like it's different levels. So I think it's ultimately it's brilliant for puppetry. In the way of movement and looking at that movement. I think that's been really successful for me to work with them. I think they get it straight away. But I think that's what you pioneered as well about the whole music thing that nobody maybe think about. But why not make it total theatre and bring it all in there for a whole combined audiences, which is again that power that we've all want. None of us want. So anybody, even if they're of that background, they don't want to work in those environments, which is just that environment. So you want mixed. Yeah. And I think it's really exciting what's happening in that. The community of accessibility now is driving a lot of things, technology, captioning, audio captioning. It's making something really interesting for mainstream. It's really beautiful. I don't think there's any, to me technology is just another tool, and it's just not really, I don't get so frightened with it, it's just another thing to play with. I think as I would describe to students recently about the puppet, I think the puppet keeps alive an element of sort of all humans need it, and it's about make-believe and suspension of disbelief. So it's those two aspects which through the young people we've worked with because of that. Like the young child we worked with when we were doing the Jane Yolland story, who said during COVID that her imagination took her to a place, a little space, an imaginary space in her head, which she used to play with her mates because she couldn't do it in reality. So these things, and I think it is a knock-on. I think that taking away those aspects of what we do in a way of like, imagination and suspending disbelief and make-believe, I think it's going to have an impact on mental health because people can't find another way out. So I think it is key. I think, and fundamentally human in a way of being able to do that. And if you're not able to do it in a playful way at a certain age, and I think it becomes quite difficult later on.
I think it's still fragile. Even the people with the powers to be here, when I mentioned the fact that we're going to do it again, you know, and they want us to change and things, and they said, you sure you want to work with young people? And I go, what? They don't even understand the value, you know, because they want to work with older people because it's going to be better clients, but they don't realise like the importance. So I think if anything, that legacy to me is keep that, and I think we're all within the team, within yourselves, and the projects we've done here has given it quite high profile because you've taken it and taken it out. I think that whole formula really brilliantly about labbing it, taking it out and bringing it in, because that's empowerment of everybody. I mean, that's just, the student sees the impact that they have on the industry. I mean, it's ultimately what these places want, what they call work-like experience. It's like, because they are more focused on that, a big percentage will do it. So, yeah, that whole value of what that's about, that relationship of, it should happen more really, and I always thought it could happen more on a lot of different levels where you had impact with industry on a direct back that you brought that in and you played, and it's far more exciting that you could do things like that. So I think the model and the legacy is beyond it. It's beyond its time in a way. I don't think they've even caught up to even thinking about doing things like that.